Hello there, and welcome to Talking Nerdy, the show where we take various story arcs and events from current comics and we cover them. I'm your host, Obi-Wan Jabroni. Now, our story today is Hellions number 13 through 16, written by Zeb Wells, with art by Roge Antonio and colors by Rain Barato. Mr. Sinister's plans are crashing in on him, and the Hellions may have to pay the price for his transgressions. So, with that, let's start talking nerdy. First up, we have Hellions number 13, Wary Travelers. The Hellions are falling apart. Havok's shame at his placement on the team has him pulling away from the rest of the group. Greycrow is getting a cold shoulder from Psylocke, who herself is being torn between her loyalty to her teammates and the leverage Sinister has over her. Orphan-maker is being shunned by Nanny as she puts all her love and attention toward the secret Smiley-AI baby she stole from the anti-mutant group known as the Right. Now, we open on Nanny's ship on Krakoa, and Nanny is holding and feeding the baby Smiley that she stole, and she hid away from the other Hellions. Now, we switch to the Hellions base. Greycrow, Empath, and Wildchild are at a table drinking and talking when Psylocke walks by. Greycrow gets up and runs to catch up with her, and she says that everyone seems to be getting along better after they saved Sinister from Arcade. And he tells her, "Yeah, you should be happy too. You led us to victory." She stops and turns to him, saying, You have no idea what I did," and walks away, telling him to stay away from her. Greycrow watches her leave and turns to leave in the opposite direction, when he hears someone crying in a nearby room, and he goes over to investigate. And he finds Orphan-maker alone, and he sits down with him, and Orphan tells him that Nanny yelled at him and hates him now. Greycrow sighs and asks him if he wants to help clean some guns. Now, elsewhere at Sinister's lab, Sinister is on a call with Mastermind, and we learn that they got Arcade's clone labs now, and Mastermind is demanding his payment for help doing so. Sinister says he will be paid, and he hangs up on him. And he leaves to go to his dining room to eat dinner, and he finds another Sinister waiting at the table for him. And we learn that it's the Sinister that was thought to have died on Amenth during the X of Swords event. And the Amentian Sinister tells him that Tarn tortured and experimented on him, but he was able to escape. And Sinister says he don't care, and that it's time for Amenth Sinister to go to the incinerator. Amenth stands and says no, and he punches Sinister. Now, back with Greycrow. Him and Orphan-maker are cleaning guns when Havok walks in. And he starts to talk to them when the lights turn red and alarms start to go off. Psylocke and Wildchild rush in and she says, "Let's move. That's Sinister's private alarm." And they all rush to Sinister's lab and find Sinister on the ground with Amenth holding a knife to his throat. Amenth stands and says, "Rejoice, I have survived and returned." And they all look at him real confused. And he turns to Sinister saying, "You didn't tell them, did you?" And he smiles. Sinister quickly tells them that he sent a clone with them to Otherworld, but he didn't think he would escape. Amenth laughs and says, "I didn't escape. Tarn sent me back along with his locust vial." And all around them, Tarn's experiments walk out of the shadows, surrounding them and saying, "Praise Tarn." Amenth turns and smiles and says, "You should be thanking me, Hellions. I arranged a rematch for you." And that ends the first issue. Taking us to Hellions number 14, The Judgment of Angels. And we open at Arako's quiet council chamber, and Tarn is arguing with the rest of the council, saying he wants to attack and take charge against some of the Krakoans that stole from him on Amenth. Storm and the rest of the council tell him that if he does, they will be forced to destroy him. And he says he won't attack. They have his word, and he leaves and he goes to a balcony elsewhere. And as he stands overlooking Araco, a small portal opens next to him and a small teal bladed fish thing comes through. And we learn that it's a messenger telling him that his vial has found Sinister, and he smiles and says, well, guess it's to Krakoa then after all. Meanwhile, at Sinister's lab, the vial tell the Hellions to give in and accept their death this time. Nanny, Orphan-maker, and Wildchild start to shake with fury that they can't stop, and they charge at the vial, yelling, die, pig fuckers. And they start to fuck the vial up as the rest of the Hellions watch in confusion. One of the messengers open through a portal followed by Tarn, and Nanny lunges at him, but is easily swatted away and smacks a wall. Wildchild follows close by and attacks as well, but Tarn stops him mid-air and says, you're more metal than when we last met, child. Your genes dance to the music of a mynth. I don't know how you stole this tune, but as you took it, I shall take it back. And and the glow surrounds Wildchild, and he starts to scream. And he drops back down to the ground and runs back and hides behind Psylocke, reverted back to his animalistic form. And Tarn looks to Sinister and reads his mind, saying, ah, so you coveted the genetic fruits of my sadism, and you spun a web of lies so your children would steal them from me. But do they know how you repaid them? Perhaps they should. Perhaps they will. And all of the Hellions' eyes glow as Tarn sends the message, and they learn that Sinister used them and killed them all to cover it up. Greycrow yells that he's gonna fucking kill Sinister. And Sinister smiles and says, or you could eat shit. And he pushes a button in his pocket. There is a loud crash, and hundreds of Sinister clones emerge from their pods and all charge at the Hellions and the Locust Vial. Sinister runs off towards the gateway with the Aminthian Sinister at his heels, leaving the Hellions behind to face the Sinisters and Locusts. And that ends this issue. Leading us to Hellions number 15, Fire and Brimstone. Now, we open in Brooklyn, and Sinister and the Mint Sinister have arrived at Arcade's cloning labs. And Sinister promises to show Mint the Chimera program. Now, at this point, we switch to Sinister's lab on Krakoa. Tarn and his Locust Vial have destroyed the last of the Sinister clones, and Tarn has the Hellions pinned to the ground with his powers. And he starts to raise Havok and Empath off the ground and tortures their minds. When Psylocke screams out to stop, and they both fall to the floor silently. Tarn turns and says he felt that, and she says to stop, and she will tell him where Sinister went. Now, he agrees to give them freedom in exchange, and she tells him about the clone facility in Brooklyn. Now, back with Sinister. The Sinisters. Sinister and Amint arrive at the clone facility, and Sinister says, the previous owners had fallen on hard times. Times that became harder when I discovered he had something I wanted. I dominated his mind and bent him to my purpose. Also, I could continue our work in secret. Because I gained this facility to push our work forward. I studied Tarn's splicecraft, pulled it apart, made it mine. He doesn't only rearrange his disciples' DNA, he combines them. I've seen the future, and the future is Chimera. Chimera, sorry. And at that point, there's a pop behind them, and they turn to see Tarn step through one of the Bladefish portals. And Amint drops to his knees instantly and starts repeatedly yelling out, praise Tarn, praise Tarn. Now, back in Krakoa, Psylocke explains to the Hellions about Sinister's ruse to get a hold of Murder World from Arcade and how she helped him do it. Greycrow yells, "Fuck this," and starts to disassemble his robot arm and legs and forming a huge gun out of all of its parts. He unloads it all on the vial while yelling, "Do you see? Do you see what I am? Do you see what you've been fucking with?" And he kills all of them but the huge guy named Amino Fetus, who starts eating all the corpses. And seconds later, Tarn comes back running through his portal, yelling, "No, don't let it eat. It will destroy us all." And as he does, hundreds of small fetuses start to pop up on Amino's back and yelling "gore" in unison. Tarn freaks out and says he has to destroy Amino or everyone in the universe will be in danger. And he opens a portal around Amino and they both disappear. And the Hellions all charge through the first portal and come out behind Sinister and Amenth. Sinister says to not be hasty and that it was all worth it. Havok says he don't care and that he's going to blow the lab up regardless. When all of a sudden Psylocke yells out, "No, he has my daughter. I have no choice but to help him. We can't destroy this lab." And Greycrow and Havok stand down understanding. But Empath steps forward and says, "You were told not to play with yourself or your food, Mr. Sinister." And he uses his power to make Havok snap. And Havok starts to glow, trying to fight his outburst of power. And while he's fighting it, Empath steps up to Mr. Sinister and whispers in his ear, "Emma says hello." Seconds later, Havok explodes, completely destroying everything around them, the lab, and the whole block. And that ends this issue. Taking us to our final issue, Hellions number 16, Come Hurt With Us. Now, we open in Brooklyn and we see that the Hellions and both Sinisters have survived the explosion. And they are all starting to wake up and move around. And Nanny sees Sinister and picks up a shard of metal and goes over, threatening to cut off his head. She grabs him by the hair and is interrupted by someone saying, "Hey there." And the Hellions turn to see the X-Men led by Cyclops, and he asks if everyone is okay, and Greycrow just starts maniacally laughing. Now, at that point, we switch to the healing gardens on Krakoa. And as the Hellions are patched up, Greycrow looks at Empath and says as soon as they are healed, he's going to kill him slowly. Now, we switch to later that night now. Psylocke is heading to a meeting with Cyclops and is being followed by Wildchild. She turns on him quickly and yells at him, saying to leave her alone, it's over, and to get away from here now. And still in his animalistic state, he turns and runs off, whining and crying. She enters the room, and we learn that she is leaving not only the Hellions, but Krakoa in general. And she says that she was tasked by the council to keep the Hellions in check, and that she just wished that she knew that someone else had the same job, and she turns and she leaves. Now, we switch to Emma Frost's White Palace, and Emma and Havok are talking, and he tells her how tore up he is about accidentally killing Psylocke's daughter. And Emma tells him that he stopped Sinister, and as a reward, she has told the council to resurrect Madeline Pryor. And he is struck dumb with confusion and thanks her as she ushers him out of the door. Seconds later, Empath enters the room through a different door on the other side of the room. And Emma thanks him and says she knew she could count on him to bring Sinister down. And he says that it was easy, but the Hellions want him dead. And she says he can hold up at the palace, and she turns and leaves him alone as well. Now, back at the Hellions base, Greycrow is pissed and putting his leg and arm back together, and talking to Wildchild, saying that he's going to kill Empath and find his backups and destroy them as well. Wildchild says that's a horrible idea and that the council will throw him in the pit for that. Greycrow laughs and says, "Good, and I will laugh the whole way down to go join Victor." Now, elsewhere on Nanny's ship, Nanny is playing with the Smiley baby when a face appears on the computer, and she turns to see that it is Harold, the leader of a group called The Right, and her previous employer. And he says that she shouldn't have betrayed The Right. Now they are taking everything back, and the ship turns itself on and starts to attack Nanny and take off. A tentacle grabs the Smiley baby and puts it into an escape pod and launches out as Nanny runs to a computer and hits a button. The ship explodes just as Orphan-maker comes into the clearing. He yells for Nanny and charges into the fire. And he finally finds her and helps her to her feet. But she turns and slaps the piss out of him, saying, "They've taken everything from me. Where were you when I needed you, worthless, stupid boy? I have nothing, just like you wanted. Are you happy now, Peter? Are you happy?" And Peter is distraught, and he turns and he runs off back into the rest of Krakoa crying. And that ends this week's story. I hope you enjoyed the video this week. Join us next week as we cover Last Annihilation Part 1. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And also leave a comment down below. Feedback is always welcome. You can also find and follow us on the Jabroni Nerd Network Facebook page or on Twitter at Jabroni Network. So, until next time, guys, keep talking nerdy.